Welcome into a special edition of Texans on Tap. I'm Brandon Strange with Charlie Palillo and Josh Jordan. Follow them on X at Palillo and at Josh Jordan 975 and read their work on sportsmap.com. On today's episode, we're going to give you a pre-draft, preseason primer for the Texans 2025 season. We're still 5 months away from the season starting, but just a week out from the draft. And speaking of that, we will be live either on night 1 or night 2 of the draft. That's going to depend on what the Texans do. If they pick on night 1, then we're going to go live following that pick. And if they decide to opt to trade back into night 2, then we'll be live Friday evening. But either way, do us a favor while we have you here. Click like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn those notifications on so you know when we drop new episodes like this one. All right, guys, let's do a quick transaction recap for the team so far. On the offensive side of things, Texans signed Nick Caley as their offensive coordinator. They traded for wide receiver Christian Kirk, then restructure his deal to free up money. They bring in offensive tackle Trent Brown and Laken Tomlinson. In the category of outgoing, Stephon Diggs signs with the Pats for 3 years, $69 million, with $26 million guaranteed. And Kenyon Green gets dealt for C.J. Gardner-Johnson. That takes his defense because, along with bringing in safety C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Texans extend Danielle Hunter an additional year, making him the second highest paid defensive end in the league. They re-up Stingley and Petrie. Sting at 3 years, $90 million. Petrie at 3 years, $39 million. And then they also bring in cornerback Ronald Darby. Other notable departure, long snapper John Weeks signs with the 49ers. And if I missed something, you guys can let me know. So all that said, guys, what are your thoughts at this point of the offseason for Nick Caserio, DeMeco Ryans to this point?
Well, the overhaul of the offensive lines, the overriding story, in conjunction with the change, of course, at offensive coordinator, Slowick out and Caley in. Offensive line, a mess last season, and they traded their best offensive lineman. I mean, pretty indisputably, Laramie Tunsil, for his warts, their best offensive lineman. Still a very good pass-protecting left tackle. Maybe slipped a notch, but still their best offensive lineman. So you have weakened a weakness. But tactically, it made sense. You don't want to do another mega contract with Tunsil. He's probably overpaid for where he is in his career, yet looking for one more giant bag. Caserio, to me, got very good value in return. Essentially a second and a third round pick where you swap 4s out, and I'm not worried about 6s and 7s. They get a third rounder next week and a second rounder in 2026. Now, beyond what they still have on their roster at O-line, I think the way they attacked the offseason in free agency and trade in the O-line, kind of like we're at a roulette wheel, and each individual bet, if you're playing single numbers, is a bad bet, right, by the odds. But if you have enough out there, you're hoping that one of them hits. Right? Cam Robinson, former high draft pick of the Jaguars, went to the Vikings in season and played reportedly. Ed Ingram, acquired from Minnesota, had really done nothing as a pro. Hulking Trent Brown, a couple of years back, had a couple really big years. But what kind of player is he at this point? And Laken Tomlinson, signed away from Detroit, really the essence of journeyman. He's been sensationally durable. Attendance is part of the grade, but he's middling at best. So a youthful talent infusion, I think, is still warranted in that offensive line, but they're hoping for strength of numbers, that one of those numbers hits at a tackle spot in conjunction with Titus Howard and or Blake Fisher blossoming in his second season.
Yeah, that's kind of my big question is, what do they think of Blake Fisher? I think that could really dictate how they approach the draft. If they look more for an interior guy on the offensive line, or if they're still looking for another tackle. I think Cam Robinson, I mean, they paid him $12 million and he has some room for incentives to make even more. I think he's your left tackle for this year, but he's only on a 1-year deal. And Charlie was right. He's actually pretty good for the Jags, but when he went to the Vikings, he had some struggles midseason, and made sense for the Jags to deal him. It wasn't they were terrible. He was in the last year of his deal, so they were like, why not get something for him while we can? Minnesota's left tackle went down. So I think Cam Robinson, he might be okay for you for this year, but going forward, who knows if they bring him back or not. And what are they going to do with Titus Howard? Is he playing guard? Is he playing tackle? I don't know. So a lot of up in the air. And the wide receiver group is pretty awful, if I'm being honest. I like the Christian Kirk addition, but he has dealt with some injuries. He hasn't been able to stay on the field. Last year, I think it was a collarbone, so nothing to worry about too much with his legs or anything. But he's going to be a free agent after the season. And then what do you really have? Mechie and Hutchinson. How many times have we gone to battle with those guys? And Nico Collins is the only one that can get really open. And if you think about the playoff game last year where Nico got dinged up with that shot to the ribs, like they didn't really have anything else to go to, which is why I find this draft very interesting. Are they going to attack a wide receiver with that first pick? There's some good options. This isn't the best year for wide receivers. The consensus is a lot of kind of really good number 2 wide receivers, maybe only a couple of number 1s that the Texans will be drafting too late to get their hands on one of those guys. So I'll be paying attention to that. I think my biggest takeaway or biggest stance on this, I don't want to see a defensive player picked absolutely with the first pick and probably not with the first 2, because pretty much everybody's back on the defensive line. Brandon hit on all the contract extensions they gave out. It's a pretty stout group. They add speed, a linebacker from the Colts. So I feel like the defense is in a really good spot. They got to upgrade this O-line, and they got to get some more playmakers.
Yeah, Kirk, clearly the key wide receiver acquisition, who they got for nothing. Right? Jacksonville was just moving salary. $16.5 million tag on Kirk coming here. Justin Watson. I'm not saying that he's going to have jaws dropping, but as kind of a tertiary contributor on the Chiefs the last couple of seasons, caught some balls from Mahomes. And, if it's an incremental upgrade from what you got from a Mechie or Robert Woods, maybe Watson ticks them forward. Kirk, of course, they hope is the big speed threat. You're hoping Tank Dell can rejoin the team somewhere the back half of the regular season, but you don't want to have all your eggs in the Dell basket. And he's so slight of build that when he comes back, it's kind of Lance McCullers. When is his next injury going to occur? But Kirk coming out of Texas A&M, a dynamic deep threat. Jacksonville very ambitiously signed him to a huge contract as a free agent, and the Texans get the last year of that, hoping they have an upgraded complement to Nico.
Yeah, so for reference, Texans they pick, as it stands now, 25th overall, 58th, 79th, 89th, and then they have a 5th rounder and 2 7s. Nick Cassero has said how they don't draft for need, they draft for best available. And that's a very common GM thing to say. But, look, we know what the O-line has been in the past couple of seasons here. Is it, I know, again, you're not going to draft based on need, right? But this team really does need to protect CJ Stroud. He is the critical piece here. I mean, also they need for him to have weapons to throw to as well. But if they're not able to protect CJ Stroud, is that unforgivable for his 3rd season that you haven't been able to really fortify his protection?
I would say so, given Nick Caserio's first round pick in charge was a blown draft choice on Kenyon Green, who leaves here absolute as a flop. Injury issues. Yeah, well, the performance issues were there also. I mean, if Blake Fisher does not develop, that was a 2nd round pick on an offensive lineman. So yeah, that is job 1 and probably job last as the clock ticks on CJ Stroud being very cheap still on the Texans books. I do want to add, and it's natural given the offensive failures and CJ's at least mild regression in the O-line mess, that's the side of the ball that's going to command the natural focus on, hey, they still have work to do. But I thought their single best acquisition of this offseason was C.J. Gardner-Johnson, fortifying what already is a strength of the team in the secondary. So you have Stingley and Lassiter as 2 top corners. Stingley all-pro, Lassiter work in progress, but a very good rookie season. And now you have 3 safeties. Petrie, who as Josh mentioned, or as Brandon mentioned, 3 years, $39 million. Wow, a little bit on the money there. But he'd made a leap in season 3 before going down with his season-ending injury. And then you have Caleb Bullock as a ball hawk back there. So with the most common defensive unit on the field being the nickel package, the Texans have a quintet that runs with the big dogs in the NFL. And we know what they have with Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson as the 1-2 pass rush combination. And then they did some tweaking to the depth, re-signing Derek Barnett, Darrell Taylor, not a name, but a 1-year, $5 million guy, because the philosophy clearly has been, Will Anderson sat about 1/3 of the snaps last season, right? You want to tenderly treat his ankle when he has issues there, but they want fresh pass rushers, especially in the fourth quarter. And Danielle Hunter was magnificent. He's also into his 30s, so you don't want him playing 95% of the snaps. But D front and the back unit, the secondary, wow. That can be an absolutely dominant defense given good health and some other things falling into place. I think they could still use a little upgraded linebacker, but to me, that's down the priority list.
Yeah, they added EJ Speed there, and Christian Harris just wasn't able to stay healthy last year at linebacker, so maybe that's why they grabbed some insurance there. To'o is actually a little better than we thought. The defensive line, Charlie hit on it. I mean, Mario Edwards Jr.'s back. And Sheldon Rankins, he went and joined the Bengals for a year. They brought him back. So, I mean, with Barnett, just this D line is loaded, and it's safety. Jimmy Ward just keeps getting hurt, so they had to go find somebody else to help them back there. And hopefully Petrie can be your nickel defender there and stay healthy. He's been a good player. So, I mean, the defense is set. They are ready to go. The only place people really point to is maybe a badass defensive tackle or something like that. That could be something maybe they go after, but just makes no sense right now for how much they need on the O-line. You mentioned protecting CJ. Brandon sacked the second most times out of all quarterbacks last year, only behind Caleb Williams. He sacked 52 times. That's a lot of hits on your young quarterback. So they got to get that. They got to get that figured out. So I think the O-line will be the priority. Daniel Jeremiah, he does a lot of the draft stuff for NFL Network. He's the one that called the CJ Stroud draft pick and the Will Anderson trade before it happened a couple of years ago. He made a really interesting comment the other day. He thinks it's going to be O-line. We can get to who he thinks it could be a little later, but the point he said on why he thinks it's O-line, he's like, how do you look your quarterback in the eye and not draft an offensive lineman? Like, I don't know how you do that with all the hits CJ Stroud took last season.
One other free agent signing, actually re-signing after a couple of years delay, I want to note, Tremont Smith, who, if you're thinking he was a Texan, yeah, a couple of years when no one was paying attention to the disasters, 2021 and 2022. But why I want to note this, nominally, he's a defensive back, but without injuries, he's not going to see the field. He played 20 defensive snaps the last 2 years in Denver, but a special teams ace, cover teams, also a sometime kickoff returner. Note, they want more kickoff returns, right? Touchbacks now are to the 35-yard line. Mm-hmm. And I think that is going to have a meaningful change, where I was a little surprised, frankly, that the NFL settled into, okay, we'll concede drive starts at the 30. Right? I think way back when they were at the 20, then to the 25, then to the 30. I think you start a drive at the 35-yard line offensively, you're pumped with that. So I think kickers are going to be tasked with, hey, your lob wedge. We want you to hit it high and have it come down inside the 5-yard line, absolutely inside the 10-yard line, and we're going to cover, because we don't want to just concede possessions routinely starting at the 35-yard line. So not just the Texans, I'm thinking plenty of other teams are going to emphasize adding guys to special teams coverage units where that role has been diminished the last couple of years because of all the touchbacks.
It's so gimmicky, right? Like, I mean, just as an aside, it's you increase the you're trying to increase the safety element here to where guys aren't, having guys where they're catching the ball with guys with running starts and can smack them. But then all of a sudden now it's like, but we do want them to return the ball, so let's make it super punitive for touchbacks. It just really seems gimmicky. Let's just go to the draft because Josh kind of delved into the waters here about who they could be looking for. Like, we don't know. It's hard to say. And Nick Caserio has been pretty cagey when it's come to the draft, trading up, trading back. He's a guy who likes to wheel and deal. What are the chances that they actually end up drafting in the first round here? And who do you think they're going to be targeting with those first 3 picks? They've got a first rounder, second rounder, third rounder. Who, if they stand pat, who do you think they're going to be looking at, or positions? Maybe not the who, but the positions. And then if they don't stand pat, what do you think they end up doing? Is it back or is it forward?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of how the board falls. Casario, I thought, was mixed in honesty in some of his pre-draft comments. He absolutely hammered to nail in talking about mock drafts and all these insiders claiming to know this, that, and the other. There is so much smoke blown, and every mock drafter gets the vast majority of the picks wrong every year, from Mel Kiper Jr. down. That's just how it works. Now, mock drafts can be fun exercises. They're real good ways to get familiar with names and guys who will be drafted if you want to consume all that. But that anyone is going to come anywhere close to nailing half the first round picks, and I mean pick to team, because we could have dogs going to food bowls and pick out a majority of the players who will be drafted in the first round, right? That's not hard at all. It's when are they going to go that matters. So Casario poo-pooing mock drafts, yeah. But hey, we always draft best player available. No, or if you do, that's silly. You need to have a little bit of a sliding scale on that, because either that or you're fudging grades to suit your purposes. Because if the highest graded player on the Texans draft board when 25 rolls around is a quarterback, you think they're taking a quarterback? If it's a running back, you think they're taking a running back? If it's an edge rusher, do you think you're taking an edge rusher? No, and no. Now, you don't reach. You don't take a 70-cent player over a guy you think is a $1 player. But if that's how the board sets up, well, then you trade back. Offensive line, to me, if all players are graded equal who are on the board when the Texans are at number 25, I go O-line. And if you're telling me you're disqualified from selecting an O-lineman, I wouldn't cringe if they took a young interior defensive lineman, right? They have more kind of temp, journeyman, vet guys. And obviously wide receiver would be another position that if they took that guy in the first round, and of course, it's always more exciting for the average fan, the guys who touch the ball. You're more likely to recognize them. In fact, I think Kiper had Teteroa McMillan, the stud wide receiver from Arizona, falling all the way to 25. I don't think most Texans fans would be going, "What are you doing? Why didn't you take an offensive lineman?" If you take a wide receiver with that kind of pedigree.
Yeah. And, he's one of those big guys. That would be an interesting fit for them. I think it's O-line. I think that's where they're going to go. If I brought up Daniel Jeremiah, the players that he predicts that he thinks the Texans will go after is either Tyler Booker. He's an interior offensive lineman from Alabama. You got that Will Anderson connection. He's supposed to be a great culture kind of guy. We know the issues that the Texans had with the culture on their offensive line and in that room. So that could make a lot of sense, especially with that Alabama connection. And then another one, kind of a local guy as far as he played at the University of Texas. Kelvin Banks is the other guy. He's an offensive tackle. He thinks that could be the pick. I'd be fine with either one of those two. It's interesting, though, as I look around, I looked at Lance Zierlein's new mock draft and some of the other ones, and a lot of these guys are not available. I'm seeing them going in the teens in a lot of these mock drafts. So I'm curious if Daniel Jeremiah is hearing something, if the Texans are going to go that route, are they going to have to trade up to get in that area to get one of those guys? I think that'll be something to watch for. Also, this year's draft, really kind of up in the air. A lot of mixed opinions on a lot of the guys, especially after like the top 10. The rest of the first round, second round, a lot of varying opinions. So it's a harder year to kind of get a beat on what people are really going to do. The other guy we're seeing connected to the Texans a lot is Golden at a University of Texas. He ran the 4.29 at the combine, wide receiver. I think he'd be a fantastic fit. He's a little bit of a, he's 5'11" in the 190. So he's not the biggest receiver in the world, but he's not tiny like Tank Dell. And I think he could be your Tank Dell replacement. I don't have any confidence that he's going to play this year. I hope I'm wrong. I love Tank, but that was a terrible knee injury and he's still going through it. And for him to regain all his explosiveness in that amount of time, I find that hard to buy. So I think that might be where they go, is if they do go McMillan or Golden. McMillan's more of a really tall receiver, kind of more similar to Nico. So I don't know if they would feel like that's the fit for their offense. But hey, if you're at 25 and a player that was projected to go in the top 20 falls to you at a position you're in need of, going to be hard to pass on that. I also think it could be kind of a deal of, is the run on offensive linemen going to happen before they pick and some of those receivers fall to them? Or could it be the opposite, where some of the receivers go off beforehand and there's a few of the offensive lineman options that you really like that are there? I think just kind of how it goes in the first round could have a big impact on what they do. And yeah, Nick Caserio saying we're taking best player. Of course, that's what you say a week away from the draft. That's because everybody's looking at these mock drafts. They know your team needs. You want to try and avoid somebody trading right in front of you and sniping the player that you want, because they know what your team needs are. So I think that's just kind of coach speak, GM speak, if you will, from Caserio.
No doubt. Ohio State has 2 offensive linemen.
Yep.
That if they make it to the Texans, if either makes it to the Texans, to be a sensible pick of 25. And then one of those 2, it's about an organizational philosophy. His name is Josh Simmons. He's coming off a torn patella tendon.
Yep.
Man, that's a major surgery, but he's thought to have Pro Bowl talent. Well, if you're the Texans and you need to fix this offensive line, upgrade this offensive line now, right, all things being equal, CJ Stroud saying, yeah, take the Buckeye to protect me. But if you're thinking the guy, it's kind of his redshirt year to work back, get his legs underneath him, in a 2026 is where he's all the way back physically, would you steer clear from that guy, or do you mesh 2025 and looking beyond? And in terms of, if there's a run, if they're dead set, we want an offensive lineman. We're not going to grasp badly for one, but we want one. And we need to move up to 20 or 21 to do it. Right? They do have the capital from the Tunsil deal, right? They have the 3, they have the 2 next year. So Caserio does have some weaponry. I don't mean to go into the top 5, but they're not going to look to go that high. If it's to move up a few spots because, only one of the offensive linemen that we like enough to take in the first round is left on the board. So that's all that unfolds during the draft.
And that other Ohio State offensive lineman Charlie's talking about is Donovan Jackson. And I bring that up because he's kind of considered an interior offensive lineman, that he'll be a great guard. But he did have experience playing left tackle last year because his teammate Simmons went down with that injury. So he had to play some tackle. So he can do it, but it looks like his future is as a stud guard. And I bring him up also. I believe that's who Lance Zierlein currently has projected for the Texans to take at 25. So he's definitely on Lance's radar, and he's got some ties to the Texans and to agents and stuff like that. So he might be onto something there.
We mentioned that Caserio is a wheeler and a dealer on draft night historically, and I opened talking about perhaps they trade back. But Charlie, you just raised the possibility of maybe they do like somebody that maybe there's a run on offensive linemen. They want to get up, grab somebody earlier than expected. What do you guys place the odds on that, given the weaponry, the assets that Nick's dealing with? Maybe that they do trade up. I mean, not saying go crazy, but what are the odds do you place that they maneuver themselves into a position to get somebody who they have their eye on?
Throwing a dart at the board, just like all these GMs making picks.
Yep.
I'll say in order of likelihood: 1, they stay at 25 and pick. 2, they move back. 3, they move up. Pure guess. Pure guess.
For me, if I could just kind of have my pick, I think I'd like to see them hold tight at 25 and be fortunate enough that one of the offensive linemen that they like falls to them there. I would like to see that. And then for them to take that extra third, maybe to trade up into the second round a little higher and get one of these wide receivers that fell out of the first round. And maybe you can get a good value there. Like maybe Luther Burden III is there. I know he maybe has some character concerns, but that's why some of these guys are available in the second round, is they didn't check all the boxes. So sometimes you can find some value there. So I'd like to see them come out of these with these first 3 picks with one of these O linemen and a wide receiver, round 1, round 2-ish type player. I would be perfectly fine for that. If you get a quality receiver and a young guy, like I said, Christian Kirk, he's a free agent. This isn't just for this year. This is moving forward. Instead of trading a second round pick for Stephon Diggs for 1 season and then letting him leave, go spend a second round pick on a guy that can be your receiver for 4 more years. That's what I'd like to see them do. I think they'll do that. They did a great job going and getting Lassiter last year at corner, finding a value in the second round that turned out to be a terrific player. Maybe they can do something like that at receiver this year.
Thought exercise. Would you trade your whole draft and next year's number 1 for Travis Hunter?
Just as a fan, I'd want to watch it. That's for sure. I mean, it's wild. This guy's incredible. It's kind of like having an Ohtani of football.
We'll let our viewers give their thoughts on that as well in the comments. So be sure to sound off. That's going to be it for this episode of Texans on Tap. We're going to be live following the draft, so make sure you're subscribed with your notifications on, so you know what night we go on. And just to reminder, because we started this channel the year that CJ was drafted, and we couldn't have imagined that it was going to be this fun, this fast. And so we want everyone to be along with the ride for us in year 3. So until next time, for Charlie and Josh, I'm Brandon saying thanks for watching and listening. Go Texans.